Today I am joined by our very own Allison James agent, Sandra Nomer. Good morning, Sandra.
Good morning.
How are you today?
I'm good.
Today we're talking about paying it forward. And like I said, we're joined by Sandra Nomer, one of our very own Allison James agents. Before we go into details, I do just want to point out in the very beginning that we have a GoFundMe link of the story we're going to be talking about today. We are raising money for a charitable cause. So the link to the GoFundMe page is in the description of this video. But of course, we want you to know about this story and give a little bit of a background on who and what we are raising money for. So Sandra is an agent who always goes above and beyond for her clients when finding them a home. But a couple of her most recent clients are someone very special to her. It is a mom and a son who were homeless and living out of their cars for very many years. Sandra actually went through the process and helped the two purchase a piece of property where eventually they want to place a home for them to live in. But of course, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to make this a hospitable and safe place to live. There has been a slight turn of events in the past couple of days, so let's just get right into it and share their story in hopes that it touches you and even inspires you to help make a difference in someone's life. So Sandra, if you just want to start out giving us a little bit of background on Sue and Brian, are their names?
Okay, I'd love to. Well, I was originally referred to Brian as someone who could do weed eating for me, cleaning up properties that I'm putting up for sale or trying to help list for my clients. And he was a real sweet person, but it was real obvious right from the beginning, and the person that referred him to me said that he's a little bit slow. So I don't know his exact diagnosis, but he is a little slow. He doesn't understand or communicate really well everything, but he's a wonderful worker and a lovely person. And I knew that he was homeless and he was living with his mother in a suburban since he was 9 years old. She left, what I was told, she left a domestic violence situation where she and her son were being abused. And they just left in the suburban, and they had no place to go and no money. And they apparently were living in this suburban on the streets for like 5 years before I met them. And they would move from place to place. So Brian came to do weed eating for me, and then I got to know his mother, Sue. They're both on disability. She also is handicapped, and I don't know her exact diagnosis, but she has a lot of medical issues. She's overweight, and she's kind of nervous, and from being abused, she's never got to trust people. So they just try, and people are running them off of property when they're in their car. So I hired Brian, and he did a beautiful job weed eating and was such a sweet young man. They don't drink, they don't smoke, they don't do drugs. They're just trying to survive, and they have a little kitty in the car that they take on a leash everywhere they go. So I began to give Brian as much work as I could and refer him to my clients. As well, I many times would let them park their car on my properties that we were rehabbing. If we were doing a remodel, we would have Brian and Sue stay on the property. They could use the toilets, and then they would watch the tools, and it was kind of like having a security guard on the property, and then no one could run them off because they had permission to be there. Their typical problem was they park the car in a parking lot at Safeway or somewhere for the night, and frequently the police would run them off even though they weren't doing anything wrong. So it was always difficult for them to find a safe place to park their cars. So I would talk to my clients into doing the same thing. I'd say, look, I've got these people, Brian and Sue. They could come watch your property. The contractors don't have to lock up their tools or haul them all away at the end of every day. So we'd been going like that. And then another friend of mine who is a carpenter, and she first referred me to Brian and Sue, she said, Sandra, let's see if we can't find them a place to live. And so we tried to find subsidized housing. We took them to places. We helped them kind of polish up a little bit, get cleaned up, put on clean clothes to meet with people or meet with landlords. We even were willing to co-sign to get a landlord to give them the tiniest little place to stay. And we couldn't find anything except subsidized apartments. And twice we got them in a subsidized apartment, but there were so many children, so much drug dealing, so many people, so much noise above them, below them. And Sue got so nervous that within 48 hours, she'd be back in her car on the street. It just wasn't going to work. She needed some peace and quiet and couldn't survive in the chaos of some of this low-income housing. Decided to look for property. And we've been looking for more than a year because I have to find something that's cheap, 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 something that's not way far out of town because they have this suburban that's a gas guzzler. They have their possessions in the suburban and they have a storage unit where they keep the rest of their possessions. And so I didn't want them to be way out in the boondocks because that's too much gas to come and go. And they both have doctor's appointments and things. So we were looking for something close in. Then I couldn't have it next to a really expensive house because honestly, they are homeless people. They have a lot of baggage and junk they carry around with them. They don't look the neatest in presentation. They're not horrible, but they're not going to, people are going to be upset with them next door. And so we tried to find something that had enough buffer. They wouldn't bother anybody, but could have their own space. And finally, another realtor friend of mine found it and sent it to me and said, look, we found 20 acres and it's on the side of a hillside. So someone else, if they were going to build a standard home, would have to do a lot of dozer work, which would cost a lot of money. So this house, the guy paid $200,000 for it originally. He put in a couple roads and he was going to develop it. And then he had health concerns and issues. He was an elderly guy. So he put it on the market. It was on the market 2 years. Nobody wanted to buy it because it's 20 acres on the side of a mountain and not an easy building site at all for anybody. And so at any rate, long story short, I contacted the other agent who I knew quite well, and I told him the story about Brian and Sue, and I says, can you help us get into this property? She's got a little money for a down payment. We need the owner to take a note. And by gosh, we pulled it off. We bought the property with a little down payment. Out of the blue, Sue had a cousin of hers passed away in California, and unbeknownst to Sue, left her a little bit of money in her will. So Sue had $30,000 to put down on a property, and that made it all possible. But we didn't have money for the building permits and other things. So our goal now is threefold. We want to get them on this property. We want to get a container. First, we have to grade and gravel an area, get a container set so we can pull their possessions out of storage and stop paying a storage fee because they now have the property. Mm-hmm. And so at any rate, do you want me to go into our latest thing that happened Sunday?
First, I just kind of want to know, is this the first time you've done something like this? I know.
Well, it's the first. I've worked with homeless people, and I've worked on feeding programs in Sacramento and Placerville. So I've always been kind of into social work and into helping people, had foster children. But Brian and Sue have been a long-term. I've known them for like 15 years.
Wow.
And so they've been a long-term project to try and help them in particular get off. They're getting older. She was getting older. Get off the streets. Mm-hmm. It's horrible to be living, just here and there.
Yeah. So our original plan and the meaning of this broadcast was to raise money for Brian and Sue. Sandra called me this morning, and there was actually a turn of events that happened on Sunday. So I'll let you kind of go into that and why Brian needs our help more than ever now.
Yeah, this was a real big shock. I got a phone call from the hospital Sunday afternoon, about 2:00, and they put Brian on the phone, and he told me his mother just passed away. Mm-hmm. And he was completely shocked himself. She had gone to do laundry at the laundromat, and he went over to the property and was cutting some weeds. And she didn't answer her phone for a couple of hours, and he got worried. He kept calling and calling because they talk several times a day. They're very close. At any rate, he called, and someone at the hospital answered the phone and asked who he was. And when he said who he was, they just told him right then and there that his mother just passed away. So he was devastated and having a difficult time even functioning at the hospital. So they kept asking him, who can you call? Who can you call? There must be somebody that you can call that can come help you. So then he gave them my number. And they called me and said, how soon could you get here? He doesn't know what to do with the body. He doesn't know what to do with anything. So it's been a tough couple of days trying to help Brian work his way through this and calling the few people that did know them and would support them. So now he doesn't have her income and he does have her storage bill. So luckily the property was put in both their names. So it will automatically go to Brian with no, I just have to take the death certificate. And they have a bank account Wells Fargo helped them set up, and that was in both their names. And they have a safety deposit for their important papers. Mm-hmm. And so that Brian has access to. So right now, in addition to trying to raise money, I'm just trying to help Brian get through this. And we don't even have a funeral. We're going to do just a life celebration of life event for his mom, probably at my house. And all those things are still up in the air. I'm just trying to expedite getting at least a container on their property that they now own so that they can pull everything out of storage and not be paying a storage bill. That was one of our, so I'm sorry this was going to be a happy broadcast, and I hope we can all help Brian because honestly he needs it more than ever right now.
Well, like you had told me, one of Sue's dreams was to own something, and yes. So it can still be a happy thing that she was able to own something before she passed away. So that's amazing. But like Sandra said, now they needed your help before, but now more than ever, Brian really needs help because he doesn't have that extra income from his mom. So he's all by himself, and we're hoping to do what we can to help him. Like I said, there is a GoFundMe link in the description of this video. Your donations would be greatly appreciated. I know Allison James would appreciate it, Sandra would appreciate it, but more than anything, Brian would appreciate it. Allison James went ahead and kicked off this GoFundMe with $200. We were successfully able to raise $575 at our Temecula happy hour last month. And we have a few more happy hours coming up where Allison James is going to go ahead and continue to raise money with our Allison James agents everywhere. And so we hope that you are also able to help as well. Like our title is, Inspire Kindness and Pay It Forward. And Sandra is paying it forward by helping Brian, and we're hoping that you will pay it forward as well.
We've actually had a few more agents chip in, and we're almost $1,000 now. And I believe Wells Fargo is going to get mobilized because they knew them and helped them, and they used to go in there just to get cold water. So Wells Fargo is going to really kick it forward, and I think jump on board as well. So we're sure hoping.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Sandra, for joining us today. Your story, you're such an inspiration that you've done so much for this family. I mean, I know you've known them for so long, but just to have a heart like that is absolutely amazing. You know,
Tori, if you think about the homeless people everywhere, and you see these stories on TV, they are thrilled with a tiny, tiny little house, just water and a restroom and just to cover them in winter. A tiny, tiny house is all it's going to take to make a dream come true that they will never be run off from. So there's a lot of homeless people out there. Maybe another of us can adopt another person.
I know.
Real estate people. I contributed my commission to cover their closing costs. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot we can do as realtors to find that special, because it's just a little tiny spot of land and then put a little tiny micro home on it or a little trailer. Mm-hmm. And you've got a homeless person that's thrilled.
Because it's more than what they had before. It's amazing. So like I said, GoFundMe link is in the description of this video. Any donations will help. And we thank you, Sandra, once again for joining us today. We're going to continue to raise money. We're going to continue to keep this GoFundMe page going. And we'll make sure that everyone that donates has updates on the family. And of course, you can see how much money is being raised just by clicking on the link. So Thank you again for watching today, and thanks again, Sandra, for taking time out of your day to join us. And
thank you to Allison James. You guys have been a tremendous support, helping me pull this together and get it off the ground. I couldn't do it alone.
All right.
Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. And once again, thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great day, everyone. Bye, Sandra.
Bye-bye. Thank you.